Hey, with you evening story channel, I post new interesting stories every day. Subscribe and click the bell to not miss it. Once again, the bus came and it was full again. A woman with crutches and a bag tried to get in, but once again realized the pointlessness of her attempt. But then four young guys ran up with the intention of being the first to take seats. The bus stopped. A tall, gray-haired man with a bag over his shoulders came up and with a strong hand dismissed the guys and nodded to the woman to come in, sister. She looked at him in surprise and clumsily climbed in. A strong arm around her waist, and she found herself in the salon. Stand up, the man ordered the boy sitting in the front seat. The boy, seeing the woman with the crutches, got up hurriedly. Thank you, nodded the woman. Stop, please, asked the woman. When they began to approach the next stop, she got up, paid, and began to get out. But a little earlier, the same gray-haired man got out and helped her get off. Thank you. The woman smiled. Do you live around here? No, I did 10 years, got out. A friend of mine was supposed to live in this town, but he disappeared. So what now? I'll walk you out and figure out what to do next. I'm holding out my hand. Give me the bag. Don't be afraid, thank you. She let go of the handle of her bag. What's your name? Clara. My name's Charles. What were you in for? Well, if it was 10 years, it was for something. He smiled sadly. Now where I'm going to spend the night, and tomorrow I'll decide what to do. This is my house. Clara nodded her head. Fourth entrance to the apartment. No, I live on the first floor. Okay, goodbye again. He handed over his bag, turned around and walked. Called out to her. He stopped. What, Clara? Stay with me. Where will you go? Aren't you afraid? He walked over, looked at her with sad eyes. I've been in prison for 10 years. What should I be afraid of? Let's go in. It's a one-room apartment, clean. How does she clean it? Charles had a thought. The landlady nodded the room and went into the kitchen. Can I make you something? I'll help. The guest went in. We'll talk about it at the same time. Oh, I've got some frozen meat. The landlady took it out of the freezer. A piece of meat wanted to boil borscht. We'll have to wait. Let me deal with the meat, smiled the man. Yes, I'll do it myself, and I'll put the tea on. The man put the meat in a bowl put under water, took another knife, and suddenly laughed Clara. How do you cut with such knives? Well, I'm used to it. There's a bar over there at the table. I guess all men like to sharpen their knives, though not all can sharpen a sharp one. Charles could. They drank tea while the meat cooked and talked. Clara, what's wrong with your feet? They've been like that since I was a kid. I'm an orphan. They took me to different podiatrists. When I was little, but Clara sighed a lot. Nobody wanted me then. Not even now. Oh, I see. I look online all the time. They say it can be fixed. But even online counseling is expensive. And my pension is only enough for the bare necessities. She sighed heavily again. I'm used to it. I'm 27 years old. I'm 42 for you. Clara, let's use the first name. For you, 42 is your prime. And your hair is white. The man tilted his head. You're all right. The meat's boiling. Where are your vegetables? The man stood up. Yes, I'll do it myself. Let's do it together. Which knife is sharp? The hostess started peeling potatoes. And Charles noticed that the crutches stood aside, and under that leg, which was shorter, there was a wooden board about 10 centimeters thick. In addition, both legs were crooked. That was something to get used to. A frightening thought flashed through his mind. After dinner, the question rose as to where the guest would sleep. We've never had to ask that question. It was never necessary. Well, sometimes a neighbor came by to drink tea, and here for the night she did not think about it at once. Clara, don't make a fuss. I'll sleep on the floor. I'm not used to it. I'm sorry, I invited a guest and there's nowhere to put it. The hostess couldn't settle down. Charles spread a blanket and a pillow in the kitchen and went to bed, he thought. He would spend the night, and tomorrow he would go to look for his friend, who had the money they shared and on whom his life depended. For the last 3 nights he had not been able to sleep well. He fell asleep instantly. Clara could not sleep for a long time this night, because today she had met an extraordinary man. People are often indifferent to other people's grief, and this has never happened to her. So it's extraordinary to be noticed by a man like that at a bus stop. I had no idea it could happen to her. And then you walked her home. We made borscht together. That's happiness. And for someone else, it's a commonplace. Clara lay there for a long time, remembering every moment spent with him. And suddenly something came into her head that at first she was afraid to even think about. She was madly in love with this man. She had already resigned herself to the fact that she would live her whole life alone, that she would never have a husband or even a friend. No, that would never happen. You saw my ugly legs. No man can overcome disgust. I'm a human woman. I want a little piece of happiness, just a little bit. She didn't fall asleep until morning. She dreamed as if she was lying on the green grass and looking into the dark sky, through which the pictures of her life floated. Suddenly the sky became clear and she saw herself walking on her feet towards Charles. She woke up to a click of the door opening and creaking shut. Tears sprang from her eyes. Gone, and not even a goodbye. What was I hoping for? A promise to come back. That would never happen. Never will any man tell me I love you. Never will I have a child. She cried until she fell asleep, apparently resigned to the inevitable. The creak of the door not only woke her up, but made her rise abruptly without taking her eyes off the doorroom. She fumbled for her crutches and stood up. "It's me." His voice sounded behind the groceries. Walking in, the woman's heart thumped with frantic force. He came into the room with a bouquet of flowers in his hand. "Clara, these are for you." The crutches fell out of her hands and the ceiling flashed before her eyes. A strong hand kept her from falling. "Clara, Clara, what's wrong?" His frightened face opened his eyes in front of her. "I don't know," she said, confused. She sat up, not taking her frightened eyes off his face, and suddenly not controlling her actions. Hugged him by the neck and through tears said, "Don't go away." "I won't go away," he smiled. "If you don't kick me out, I won't. Let's go for coffee." Half an hour later, they were sitting at the table in the kitchen, drinking coffee and cakes. Clara, not taking her happy look from his face, listened to the plans for the future. "I have to go to the police to register today. I've got money for the first time. We even though they're and transferred for work on the card sum, but for 10 years the amount of money accumulated decent. I'll try to get a job right away." He shared his plans for a long time, but she didn't pay much attention. What's he talking about? His last sentence brought the woman back to reality. You have to find out everything about your disease, where it is treated and how much it costs. Charles doesn't have enough money for treatment. She lowered her head sadly. "We'll try to find it." He stood up. "Okay, I'm going to register." He saw that the woman was still sitting with her head down. He came over and hugged Clara. "Stop being sad. I don't have anyone in the world either." He leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Except for you." Charles came back in the afternoon. Clara had time to make lunch and sit by the computer. I was told I had to check in 3 times a month. Charles began to tell me at once. They told me a lot of other things, advised me to get a job. "Do you have to register first? You can't get a job without Propiska. Will you register me?" "Thank you." And then I asked about my legs. "What did you find out?" "I have to go to the regional center for a consultation." She lowered her head. "Yes, it's no use. All those prices are exorbitant. Clara will decide." During the day, they had time to prescribe Charles and go shopping. 3 days later, they went to the regional center for a consultation at the best clinic. The consultation, of course, was paid. After examination by specialists, they were received by the head doctor. The case is complicated. Treatment will be carried out in 3 stages. That is 6 months in the clinic, a year at home, then rehabilitation. In 5 years, the doctor smiled, Clara, you will be a beautiful, slender woman. The head doctor waited until the woman moved away from rainbow dreams and moved on to the pros of life. Each stage of treatment, along with the surgeries and maintenance in the clinic plus rehabilitation, is only about $50,000. The doctor turned to the man. Do you agree? Yes, Charles nodded his head confidently. They left the clinic and hailed a cab. Looking at the flashing buildings, both were busy with their thoughts. Their thoughts were different, of course, but one thing was certain. If God had brought them together, he would help them. Clara felt Charles flinch suddenly. Charles, what are you doing? But he was staring out the window of the cab at the gentleman, who stepped out of the fancy car and walked briskly toward the office. It was his friend. Clara will be fine. What didn't the woman understand? Everything will be fine. He picked up his friend and held her close to him. The next day, Charles went to the regional center again. This time alone. He went to the same building where he had seen his friend. But there was no car in the parking lot. He sat down on a bench and waited for at least an hour. Finally, the car appeared. The man he was looking for got out. He ordered his driver to do something and headed for the office. David turned around and took a closer look. Charles, is that you? How can you see I'm so gray-haired? I wasn't in the office. They'd hugged, forgetting everything that had happened 10 years ago. What had happened to Charles? It wasn't my friend's fault. Okay, let's go. David put his hand on his shoulder. They went into some kind of rest room. David pulled out his cell phone and ordered someone. I'm not here yet. You take the meeting. David took out a bottle of cognac and a glass. Here's to the meeting. We had chocolate, and Charles got right down to business. David, I need money. Charles, let me handle this. It's the right thing to do. I agree. Let me put $1 million in a very good bank account in your name at 2% interest. You and I had about $1 million 10 years ago, and it was 2%. That's $20,000 a year. You won't touch the $1 million yourself for a while. That's enough interest for you and your friend and your children. David filled his glasses, nodded his head, chewed his chocolate, and continued. That's not all. You move here with your girlfriend and come to work for me as Deputy Chief of Security. In a year, or maybe sooner, I will retire my security chief. You'll make another $100 a month. David, I'm under administrative supervision. We'll figure it out. And suddenly he smiled and took out his cell phone and dialed a number. Hey, David. There's a problem. I have a friend who lives in another city. He's under administrative detention, and he needs to move in here permanently. What's the friend's name? Charles. I'll call you, get the probation lifted. Put the phone on the table. All right, Charles, your probation problem is solved. I'm in. I agree, but... Oh yeah, my friend laughed again. Then he went to the safe, took out 4 wads of bills, and put them in front of Charles. Do you agree now? David asked again. Of course I agree. Even 10 years ago, you decided everything for the two of us. Charles felt like he was in another world. It was so different from the one he had spent the previous 10 years in. Didn't get home to Clara until the evening. Hugged her all over. We're starting a new life. We're going to the clinic tomorrow, and he pulled out the money and put the bundles in front of the woman. God, I've never seen so much. She asked fearfully, where did you get them? I met a friend. He had been attracted to money before. Now it looks like he's a regional oligarch. Thank you, Charles. Clara, why are you crying? It's because I'm happy. He offered me a good job in his firm in the regional center. Charles, why do you do everything for me? I love you, my wife. I can't live without you. For a good minute, Clara stared at him with her eyes wide open. You have no idea how much I love you. And then she buried her face in his shoulder and cried with happiness. I agree. Let's wait until I can walk without crutches. I want you to have a beautiful bride. 5 years passed. Long separations followed by months when they were together. Charles bought a huge apartment in the regional center. 6 months ago, Clara was discharged from the clinic. She walked out on her own legs without crutches. And a month later, Charles and Clara became husband and wife. Today, she was waiting for him at work as usual. Her husband worked as head of security in a large firm run by their friend David. The husband was often late. She was used to it. But today, she wanted him to come as early as possible, because she had such exciting news. And so he came in. She immediately threw herself at him. "Charles, we're having a baby."